Hello Leafs Nation, I'm Rick Scarborough and you're watching Blue and White Weekly, where we bring you weekly updates on the Leafs and the hockey world at large. I suppose I can at last get rid of this scruffy little playoff beard, but that's not what's important. What's important is we have one last game of Maple Leafs playoff hockey to talk about, so let's get into the news. Now, let's not get into the news from around the hockey world. Let's just talk about that nightmare of a game, shall we? After what was a very exciting Game 6, and if you don't believe how exciting it was, go check out our last video where our junior intern Gilsey was live at Scotiabank Arena talking with a lot of excited Leafs fans that were hyped about this game, optimistic about this game, and every single one of them got their hearts broken. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. Let's actually stop and think about the game a little bit. I don't want to think about it too much, but just a little bit here. First period begins, and the Florida Panthers are running the Leafs show. 21 shot attempts for the Panthers before the Leafs even had one. But about halfway through the first frame, the Leafs are starting to show some signs of life, and we end the first period with the score thankfully tied. Everybody say thank you, Joseph Wool, for that one. But the tie wouldn't last long as the Panthers rack up 3 quick goals in the first 10 minutes of the second, and this is bad. Max Domi answers back for the Leafs eventually, but what's the point? The Panthers put up 3 more goals, including an empty netter from Brad Marchand, because of course it was, and it's over. It's over. Leafs season is over. Game 7 curse continues. Don't make it out of the second round. The Florida Panthers advance. I think our time today can be spent not talking about that horrendous game and talking more about the future, both of the NHL as a whole as the playoffs continue, and our beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. For the Leafs, there's the obvious questions like who stays and who goes. Mitch Marner's deal is expiring. John Tavares' deal is expiring. Matthew Knies is a restricted free agent. What's going to happen with all of them? The emotional answer is boot everybody except Knies. I think we're all in agreement that Knies has a lot to prove, and he's one of the few guys that showed up throughout this entire series, even playing likely with an injury in this Game 7. But before Game 7 even began, when we were still all high on this team after Game 6, the get rid of Marner stuff was continuing on pretty much any social media platform. I don't need examples. You can go look for it very easily. And if you look at what Marner had to say post-game, I think he's ready to move on as well. I think he has realized that he's never going to win back the majority of this fan base, and there's probably greener pastures elsewhere for him. Even John Tavares, who played a very good series despite his age, just didn't have a lot to say post-game in the way of encouragement, and based on some of that wording, I'd say we could see the end of JT as well. Austin Matthews post-game, on the other hand, when asked, what went wrong in Game 7, he said, "We had too many passengers." This coming from the captain of the team, who only had 2 shots on goal. As for some more obvious who stays and who goes, Brendan Shanahan. His contract is up, and MLSE loves cutting costs, so we can either see that presidency role for the Maple Leafs vanish entirely, or Brad Treliving becomes the president and general manager of the hockey club. But as the Leafs are doing themselves no favors in their interviews, and Leafs Nation is beating them to a pulp, the ones shockingly that came to their defense were the Florida Panthers. Paul Maurice, Matthew Tkachuk, Brad Marchand all had great things to say about this Leafs team in their post-game interviews, to the point where Brad Marchand was so diplomatic, I'm starting to think if he's jockeying to become a Leaf next year. Do I want that at this moment in time? Shockingly, yes. We always say Brad Marchand is one of those guys that, you hate playing against him, but you'd love him if he was on your team. I'd love him if he was on my team. You're absolutely right. At least that's a guy that shows up, that cares when a Game 7's on the line. He, at least against us, is Mr. Game 7. If you can't beat him, why not join him? His contract is up in July, and based on how Brad Treliving likes to build his teams, I would not be the least bit shocked if him and Brad Marchand have a conversation or two. This game was just a lot to deal with. I'm having trouble formulating my thoughts, so we're going to go to our ringside reporter, Riley Roberts, with more on last night's travesty. All right, never mind. Riley has completely checked out. Well, let's move on from that nightmare and talk about what to expect as the Stanley Cup playoffs roll on. In the Western Conference Final, for the second year in a row, we have the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of people are expecting the Oilers to beat the Stars just as they did last year and advance to a second straight Cup final, but I wouldn't be so certain. If you remember our Stanley Cup predictions video from the beginning of the playoffs, our junior intern Gilsey stated that, well, he said that Colorado would beat Dallas, but he also said if he's wrong, the winner of that series goes to the Stanley Cup final, and I'm willing to believe the kid. Dallas, I think, beats Edmonton. As for Florida and Carolina, for the second time in 3 years in the Eastern Conference Final, that's anyone's game. Florida's clearly dealing with a lot of injuries. That's why the Leafs were able to get back into this series so many times. And Carolina just looks good. They're not good to watch. They're not a very fun hockey team to watch, but boring hockey works sometimes. I have no idea who's going to win that one. We're going to have a whole lot more to say here on Blue and White Weekly as the Stanley Cup playoffs march on and as the summer months begin, as the offseason creeps ever closer. But for now, thank you very much for watching Leafs Nation, and thank you for joining us on this Leafs season. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember, go Leafs, go. Next year's our year.